I mean, when I broke the news, people are like, "Oh, okay, so you got another job?"
Nope.
No. They're like, "So what's the plan?" Have none. 0 plan. Like, it'll be fine.
Guys, welcome back. On today's episode, we've been getting a lot of great feedback from people loving the way that we're mixing up both our interviews and our short segments. And today we wanted to really give you guys something to walk away from that's tangible, that feels also vulnerable and clear. And so I drafted up this episode that I thought would be fun to talk about, which is when success stops feeling like success. So today we're going to talk about something that a lot of high achieving people quietly experience, but I think rarely admit the moment when success stops feeling like success.
I
So,
mean, I think this also happens when you get the success and you don't want it anymore. It's almost like you built everything, the business, the career, and you should have that moment of I've made it. And from the outside, it looks like that. But internally, something's really off.
well, I think there's a couple examples that I know that I walk away from when I'm feeling out of whack, right? With not feeling gratitude for where I am, not having appreciation for the things, not feeling opportunity, and that each day really does bring a great deal of opportunity, no matter what you're doing in your business. So some of the examples where people will start to wonder what's happening is you just feel tired all the time. You don't feel like sleep fixes it. It feels just heavy, like trudging almost through the day to
Mhm.
day. Everything feels like a responsibility rather than an opportunity. And at times you could even feel trapped in the way you can feel trapped in the very thing that you built. And I think as entrepreneurs, as people in a leadership position, you literally plan your whole life in some instances to get to that place, right? You start at the bottom rung and you work your way up and you trudge through the different levels of management and you trudge through the different levels of entrepreneurship and business. And you're just reaching and reaching and reaching. And sometimes you look back and you don't really have the appreciation or the understanding of how far you've come. And so there's this level of exhaustion, I think. And where does that exhaustion stem from? So, really, what we want to talk about today is how entrepreneurs, therapists, people in recovery, even moms, even in your element of maybe being at home and being a mom and saying, this is everything that I wished for. And why do I feel unfulfilled or tired or frustrated, et cetera, et cetera. We really want to kind of expand our experience both in our personal and professional lives. And hopefully it'll help somebody who's listening.
One of the quotes that I've seen recently that comes across for me lately is like, you did reach your goal. You just keep changing the goalposts. Like, and I
Yeah.
think that's so true for a lot of us where we just keep going, going, going. And the goal for a lot of people who are growing a business is like expanding, expanding, expanding. And I think we've talked about this in a systems level, how that's disorienting. But I think for the leaders, if you're the one creating that growth and always looking, you can be growth minded and also know when it's time to like there's seasons. There's season for growth and there's seasons for stable, like we're just good where we're at. We're gonna just enjoy where we're at. Like you'll never have this moment again. I guess I'll ask, do you have an example in your career where like what were the signs for you when you were like, this isn't it?
I was thinking about this as I was laying out the episode, and I think that probably where I felt the most defeated in leadership was when I felt that the organization that I was a part of many years ago, and it was really my first leadership position, being a director, being a supervisor, working in a long term extended care men's unit in Connecticut, feeling really passionate about where we were headed, those early days, building and building and building. And when I started to feel that the leadership was misaligned and the ownership started to feel disingenuine, almost to a defeating level, right? That we kind of flew this flag for the organization, myself and many others. And there was this level of misalignment between us and the owner. I knew at that point that even though I had built this program with all of these wonderful people together, we built it shoulder to shoulder, that I had to leave. I think that that was probably the most defeating and felt really like a grief process because I just felt like the misalignment for me was I can't go out and represent something that I feel like is not going to be able to be sustainable. And what was happening was that it wasn't going to be sustainable and the writing was on the wall that they were going to sell. And I just felt misaligned with being talking to my colleagues that trusted me, that honored my recommendations, that if I was selling them something that no longer was being fulfilled, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't be
Yeah.
behind something that I felt was one thing at one period of time and now is going to be completely something different.
How did that show up in your body or, like, how you felt, though? Like, what was that?
Oh god. I mean, lethargic. I mean, I can so relate to that. So I ended up working remotely for the organization for a period of time because I had moved down to Maryland to be with my husband. We weren't married at the time. We were dating long distance. And then I made the plunge to come and move back to the Maryland region.
Side note, I still remember where I was when we were having that conversation. I was driving on 95 and you were like, "I think I'm gonna move to Maryland." And I was like, "Whoa, that's a
Serious.
lot." Are you
So
for
true.
real? I don't even know this
But
person.
I love when we remember those types of conversations and life-changing moments in one another. And so, I remember sitting at my desk. I had this like lovely office that I made at our townhouse and, got the desk that I wanted, got the desktop that I needed. Everything was all put together. Had like a really nice couch in the background that I could like switch spaces. The couch that I kind of wish I could podcast from right now. I wish I had that big of a space now. But, I remember sitting at the computer and being like, "I cannot even get through the day without taking, like, a nap." Like, I feel so exhausted. And that was a stark difference, okay? Because what I was doing with the organization prior was I was on the road half the year, okay? On planes, trains, automobiles. I was in school taking 3 classes each semester at night. I was doing an internship, and I was working full time and keeping up with friendships, relationships, and my own personal support.
Not high
That
performing or a lunatic at all. No, not
but that it was a fraction of what I was doing when I moved, right? School
yeah.
had ended. I was now an alcohol and drug counselor. I had done all the things, right? So to me, I was so confused. I'm like, why am I not feeling energized? So the writing was on the wall. Within a few months, I knew it was time for me to resign.
I have had the experience of working with a lot of people when I hold that mirror up of like, well, let's look at, what's going on in your life and if it feels aligned or where these touch points are. I think that if you suggest kind of uprooting your life in some way. I mean, in that way, it's not your business at that point, right? You can switch jobs, you can go somewhere else. So I do feel like that's a little bit different, right? But if you're a business owner and someone's like, well, is this what you want? Like, do you want to continue with this? That's like, well, I have to. I've gotten that response a lot. Well, I can't not see this through. Like, this is, however, I also have seen examples, maybe not just in the behavioral health field, but from a lot of people that they just give up. They give up their career. They give up their business. They switch direction completely because I think that, and I believe this wholeheartedly, there's no amount of money that your peace of mind can buy. And so, you know,
Well, I will tell
sometimes
you that. I will tell you that I had interest in the company. And so I want to speak to this because I think it's important. I kind of forgot about it. But it was it was a minority interest in the company, but I once the sale went through, I would, you know, earn X amount of dollars, right? And I don't know what it was at the time, but to me it was substantial for someone who had made this as their kind of career path and had only been a few years of being in that upward trajectory. So I really grappled with that. I grappled with, am I going to leave this position and leave that on the table when I
yeah, and give
feel
it
like
up.
I've worked so hard to create name for ourselves, a trusted resource for families and clients. And a lot of guys got well. I'm still in touch with some of the gentlemen and young adult men that went through. So I really, really struggled with that. And finally, what it came down to was if I was going to wait it out for that amount of money, whatever it was going to be, I felt like I was passing up other opportunities where I could probably grow more quickly. And so
Mhm.
I said, it's time for me to go. And I did leave it on the table. And I'm really glad I did because it
I
definitely wasn't valued at the level that we thought it would have been at.
I honestly think that that's a difference though between a growth mindset and a scarcity mindset. And also, I can speak to both of us where we have a strong faith practice, right? And, rely on other people, mentors, people that we run things by, but also like prayer and kind of opening up to like what the universe has in store, right? Because I often will limit what is a potential for me in the future by what I can understand and know now, right? So I always talk about this, but when I left my agency position, I think the same experience happened to me where, by all accounts on the outside, it was success. I had made it.
Mhm. Mhm.
I was a clinical director. I was only a couple years out of
Yeah,
school. My trajectory was up into executive level management, very probably could be there now, and like that's what
definitely would have been there by now.
yeah, and that's what school teaches you to do and strive for, right? Like you're
Mhm.
going to do this, you're going to do this. And so I was way past my peers in terms of where I was at in my career and making six figures, opening programs. We opened the first of its kind in Connecticut for, the crisis programs that I was working in. But I do remember it was still that question that my boss at the time, he was like, it wasn't a question, it was a statement. I feel like you're taking my job. I feel like you want to take my job. And it really allowed me to have this like moment of, I really don't though. You seem burned out. You're working three jobs, but you are an executive level. Like, this is actually not what I want.
Mhm.
And I left with six private practice clients and I started moonlighting at Yale. And like, if I look at that, I had no plan. But I guess it was just being open enough to the possibility and putting faith over fear of like, something better has to be there. There has to be something better on the other side of this that I can create around my family versus my family having to like react around my career, which is kind of how it felt. And I think explaining myself when we talk about feeling trapped by success, I feel like a lot of people are nervous about explaining their decision to other people. When I kind of
Oh,
broke
I've
the
so many
news,
good examples of this.
I mean, when I broke the news, people are like, "Oh, okay, so you got another job?"
Nope.
No. They're like, "So what's the plan?" Have none. Zero plan. Like, it'll be fine. They're like, "Oh, okay, like, how are you I mean, again, I always talk about this, but, like, my husband had a full-time career, which that ended up getting rocky unbeknownst to us, pretty early on after I left, but, you know, I had some sort of safety net because I had 2 young children at the time, but we also just took the leap of faith, like, "It's gonna work out, everything's gonna be fine." But yeah, explaining it to my parents, they were like, "What do you mean? You don't leave a job without another job. You don't, like." And I think that's a big part of it.
You paved the way because when I was really reflecting too on my experience on on the detox unit and thinking about what you would say and many others is like, you do have the option to leave, right? You do have the option to say, this is no longer
It's not
aligned.
serving me.
Right.
It's not serving me anymore, like, I don't like this. Bottom line, if it goes back to what we always say, right? If it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And if I don't do I like this? Sometimes I have to ask myself, do I still like this? And what don't I like about it? Because there's hard seasons, but if the season is like perpetual, like it's on, it's like not ending, we need to ask ourselves that question.
Yeah. And I did have to ask myself that question many a times. But I loved what I did. I just struggled with I struggled with a lot of the components of the facility, right? Whether that's insurance, whether that's bottom lines, whether that's profit margins, all the things, right? And some things that felt very out of my control that I was doing everything that I could do that was in my control, and I didn't feel like I had the opportunity to do what was outside of my control. And no matter how much I pushed and pulled and moved things around, it still didn't work. And so when I decided to take that leap of faith and say, okay, I'm going to move on and do something different, it's really funny because a lot of people had working theories on what I was going to do. Right. And many people were like, oh, so you're going back to work. You're going to go back to working with, your husband and,
Because that's the framework. There must be a safety net. There you
right,
have to go to something else that's like a sure thing.
right, right. And I was like, "No, this is, like, less than a sure thing, and I am actually petrified. I am
No.
totally not sure this is gonna work." But there was a lot of due diligence and a lot of faith and a lot of, I'm gonna take the risk and see what happens. And thank God I did, honestly. I mean, it has been such a game changer. Full game changer.
Anybody that I've talked to though, and I've had these conversations with people around these decisions. I end up being the call that a lot of people make. Like, should I leave this? This is what I'm thinking. Like, I've walked people through these choices before. There's this benefit package, there's this on the other side, and it ends up boiling down to how much risk you're willing to take and that faith versus fear. Because if we allow fear to rule that decision. I actually just had this conversation with somebody today. Somebody contacted me this morning and was like, "Hey, should I do this thing?" And I was like, "What's the fear?" Because it always boils down to fear. And when we talk about being trapped by success, it goes back to, you know, I am responsible. I'm going to be seen as like, a flake if I give up on this. I
Mhm.
am. It's expected of me.
Yes.
And this is what about my reputation? People are going to see
Right,
me bailing on this thing,
right,
right?
right.
And
Yeah,
so I asked what the fear was, and the fear was it's going to damage my reputation. People are
right.
going to judge me. And it's like,
Yes.
it all boils down. If we talk about X, Y, Z, A, B, C things, it all
Right.
boils down
Boils
to a
down
self
to,
centered fear.
yeah, fear of what people think or fear of what you're not gonna get. But I will say too that I was just talking to somebody else about this in terms of individuals majority of the time are thinking about themselves, okay? So even
Yeah.
if you are the biggest splash for a couple of hours on social media when you put that I am now leaving. People like to keep you on your toes, right? So they say, I have now decided that I am going to be stepping away from such and such role at such and such place, more to be revealed, dot, 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 right? And so you make that, announcement. People create their hypotheses for a couple of hours. And then before you even announce your next position, they've already moved on. Like no one's
They don't
thinking
even
about it anymore.
care.
No,
Yeah.
they're onward and upward. And again, because really what also is created in our space is a really open field for gossip, and I think that's every field, right? But in behavioral health specifically, we've witnessed that. So when we think about what it felt like, what if for those that are listening, what it felt like when the dream now needs to evolve, you know and for me, I think what I needed to realize was that it was okay to say, this is the end for now. And that the next thing is going to be something different. And I can always, always, always choose to go back in a different direction if I want to, you know? I
Yeah.
know. I think that's really where I had this like level of acceptance. It's like, okay, I could try this on for size. And if it totally doesn't work, or if I don't love it, or if I feel like I want to be in some sort of different scenario, then I have the option to pivot and go do something different.
You're always allowed to change your mind. There is a big value in doing these periodic checks, especially when you're in a leadership position of evaluating your life honestly. And I'm grateful. I know you're one of these people, but I've had other people. One thing that is coming up is after opening the IOP, I remember I would say, I don't have to do this if I don't want to. Like, I think in my mind, I had to have an out. And
Many a times.
I would say to Alan, like, listen, I could give this up tomorrow. I don't need to do this. Like, I had to have this like non-attachment to it because I knew that hopefully this is a season. But if I continue with this feeling, over and over and over, month after month, I'm not doing this. I don't care what the money is. I don't care what the I don't care. I'm not doing it. And I remember having those conversations with you
Mhm.
and you walking me through it and just being like, yeah, yeah, but you're not there yet. So we're just gonna keep moving forward and I'm on the other side of it now, right? But I think the point is that it's isolating when you're in a leadership position because you're not going to have these conversations with people in your organization. You know, you might have them with your counterparts, but it really depends on the organization you're in and how transparent. You really need that outside mentorship, and it can't be
100%.
overstated
It
how
has to be
important
different.
that is.
It has
Um,
to be. It
you
has to
need
be.
an outside point of view because the bottom line is success is not supposed to trap you. Success is supposed to be something, especially when we're talking about career success. That is not the end all be all. You know, I saw something this morning. The only people that are going to remember you working late are your family, your kids, and your spouse. That's the reality. So, all this career accolades and everything in the field, and all these things, like, yeah, it's nice, but that's not my value system, that's not my North Star, that's not and that's what I made those decisions based on. I wanna be at my kids' games. I that success to me looks like being available for my children when they need me the most, so that when they are off on their own, right, like, they still have a part of me with them because I was there during those pivotal times, you know? And I that's probably part of me as a therapist hearing all the attachment trauma stuff, like, in the room, right? It's like, "Well, I don't wanna create that."
Exactly. And I think as a closing, for those that are in deliberation, in question, unsure of what's next. If the version of success you built in the last couple of years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it's been, is no longer fitting what you expect today, it's not failure, it's just time to change. It's time to shake things up. It's time to have some open discussions and talk with individuals,
Yeah.
get a mentor, find someone to start to challenge you and say, is this really where you want to be right now? Or is it what's comfortable? And so,
Permission slip.
permission.
I have
Go
it.
ahead.
I have
Go
it.
ahead.
The
Go ahead.
permission slip is permission to change your mind. You are allowed to change your mind
Mhm.
because I think sometimes we think success or ownership or a position, XYZ is a career is what we thought it was gonna be, and it's not working for us. It's not what we wanna do. You're allowed to change your mind. So I hope this episode was helpful to everybody. As always, please follow along on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, but also send us in suggestions. We've been getting texts, we've been getting messages. It would be helpful to know what's resonating, what's not, what you'd like to hear more of that is helpful for us to keep putting out content that is helpful to you. So
Until next time.
until next time.
Thanks, guys.